response. As you all know, under Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and Stephen Miller in particular, ICE has made it impossible for members of Congress to do our jobs and conduct oversight visits. We followed all of these outrageous protocols, requesting this visit over a week in advance, getting privacy release forms, jumping through hoops, even as congressional representatives. We were greeted today by more than 20 people, including the private counsel of CoreCivic. CoreCivic is one of the two major private prison companies that are making billions of dollars from the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda. CoreCivic happens to run the Florence Correctional Facility. So I thought it was very interesting that the private counsel was there today in the conference room with us. And as I was asking very specific questions about what sort of medical facilities are available there, how many doctors are there, what the protocol is if somebody gets sick, and specifically asking questions about what happened with Emmanuel, there was extreme reluctance to answer any questions, especially from the private counsel of CoreCivic, which I found very disturbing. I also wanted to speak with a gentleman who had requested to speak with us and was denied to. My team had met all of the requirements to be able to do so, signing a privacy release form, notifying ICE, etc. I literally had to request and demand that I speak with one of these ICE agents' bosses over the phone to try to make this conversation happen today, but he still said no. What is so glaring about everything happening is that it is very clear there is so much cover-up that is occurring of the abuse and the neglect and the mistreatment of human beings inside these U.S. government-run and private prison company-run detention centers. One final thing I want to know about today, we asked about the investigation that will be happening. They say an investigation will start later this month. It is by no means an independent investigation. A part of ICE will be investigating, which is again unacceptable when a tragedy of this magnitude has occurred. We asked about how they notified Emmanuel's family of his death because my team spoke with Emmanuel's brother about all of this and they've heard nothing. They don't know when an investigation is happening. They don't even know how it got to the point where their brother's toothache led to his death because of ICE. Emmanuel is now at least the 10th person to die in ICE custody so far this year. And sadly, this is not at all an isolated case. I've seen this type of cruelty firsthand, not only at the Florence Correctional Center, but at the Eloy Detention Center nearby. I have a constituent named Yadi who is currently detained at the Eloy Detention Center in Central Arizona. She has leukemia and she's dying, and she's been there for over a year now. For more than a year, she's experienced severe medical neglect. She's lost over 70 pounds and cannot even move without a walker. She's often forced to go without any pain medication other than Tylenol. When I visited her last, I witnessed her vomiting blood and she was too weak to stand. Just like Emmanuel, she is being denied the critical medical care she desperately needs while in ICE custody. This kind of an inhumane medical neglect must end. No agency is above the law, yet ICE is now the most well-funded law enforcement agency in the United States, receiving more funding than many national militaries around the world. I am outraged and devastated for another family who has lost their loved ones at the hands of ICE. No one should die under these horrific conditions. No family should ever have to endure this again. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thomas's family said that he likely died of complications from a toothache. ICE's own version of this, the news release they put out, mentioned nothing about a toothache condition. Is there any clarity on any of this? Any way to reconcile those two?
The information that I have was that it started with a toothache at the end of February. He reported having a toothache. He was given ibuprofen. He, once started getting worse, that is when he was sent outside of the facility. And by March 2nd, I believe, is when he died of sepsis. And that's when, around that time, when I was asking questions over and over again of the ICE staff there today, they said that when it was clear that he was not going to make it and he had deteriorated significantly, they called his family, and his family was able to come to the hospital when he passed away.
What did you make of the rest? Have you had a chance to read the statement that ICE put out today regarding this timeline they put out surrounding Domus's medical treatment? Have you gotten a chance to read it? And if so, what are your thoughts on it?
I think we need an independent investigation into what happened, because the timeline is one thing. I mean, the timeline is the timeline, but the issue really is, how does a toothache lead to somebody's death within a matter of weeks, and how did it get to that point? I tried to ask a number of questions around how it is determined if something is an emergency, because ICE seems to have a lot of protocols, and they outline those protocols around how quickly they respond or react to something when a sick call is put forward. They said they have thousands of calls from several thousand people that are at the Florence Correctional Center. They said typically they try to respond within 24 hours or 48 hours. And I said, well, what if something is an emergency? And they said that determination is made accordingly. But this case demands a serious investigation. The private counsel did say in the room that he expects there to be litigation around it. And I imagine that's why he was in the room and very hesitant to have specific answers provided when I was trying to get more information about this case in particular. And they said the investigation would begin at the end of this month. And again, it's a unit within ICE called OPR that conducts this investigation. And then I asked how we would get the results of that investigation. And as they typically do, they directed me to an email address of the congressional liaison of ICE, which is typically how we are now expected to communicate with this department.
So what part did CoreCivic play, or did CoreCivic play a role in Domus's death?
I think that will be determined, but CoreCivic runs this facility. So, if there was a mistake made, if there was negligence, CoreCivic, in my view, absolutely is part of that, because this center in particular, CoreCivic it's operated by CoreCivic. They play a large role. Even today, this was the first time where I have visited a detention center where there were more than 20-some people there to conduct this tour for us, which seemed like overkill to me. But a lot of CoreCivic staff were present during this.
It took a while for this to be made public, his condition. Do you suspect that there are other deaths in the system that we don't know about?
It is certainly possible. There have been so many deaths this year alone. The pace of the deaths is getting faster and faster. This is a record number of deaths that has occurred since the beginning of 2025. Over 30 now have been confirmed. And they, from my experience, do everything that they can to withhold information from the public. And again, my experience with my constituent Yadi is what informs much of how I see this, because I'm witnessing somebody who could be a future statistic being denied the care that she needs. And so many of these deaths seem to be unavoidable, just like Emmanuel seems to be avoidable. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Emmanuel's seems also like it could have been avoidable. I mean, toothache, even if it was an infection, had it been taken seriously in that moment, likely could have been prevented. But that's why I will continue to call for an independent investigation with publicly released results for the public to be made aware of these things. I think a lot is going, ICE is trying to cover up a lot of what happens inside these detention centers, and that's why these oversight visits are so important. And it's very concerning to me that they are making it harder and harder every single time we visit to get a real sense of what's going on.
How prevalent are the reports you're getting of bad health care in the Florence Detention Center?
They're serious. I mean, we work with groups like the Florence Immigration Project quite regularly, and they track these cases very closely. And, the medical issues across, and it's not just Florence or Eloy, this is a nationwide problem. The medical neglect is very serious. That's why I've introduced legislation called the Stop Inhumane Conditions in ICE Detention Center Act to increase reporting and transparency and actually have stringent measures. So if protocol is being broken or if, there's neglect, that these companies need to have their contracts reviewed and possibly, eliminated altogether. It's unacceptable that human beings are dying in ICE custody under, using taxpayer dollars, under the supervision of these private companies, and there's literally no accountability taking place.
Speaking more broadly, because this is the first visit at the Florence Center for you anyways, anything else about the visit that is worth sharing? I mean, being the first time, being able to go inside it and see what's happening, and anything separate or different from what you've seen at Eloy?
It's definitely quite a different center in that, Eloy, just some very practical differences. Eloy has both men and women detainees. At Florence Correctional Center, there's only men. My understanding and what we were told today is that the classification of someone's potential criminal background is a little bit higher at the Florence Correctional Center. And then ICE only is responsible for a certain portion of the center, and the U.S. Marshal is responsible for another portion. But I think the biggest difference that I have been noticing over time is the way they are trying to make it more and more difficult for members of Congress to talk to detainees and to conduct these visits. Before this administration, any member of Congress could show up at any detention center and would be let in, doing unprompted visits. And that's the point, because if you're getting a carefully curated visit but led by ICE and the companies, then you're probably not getting a real assessment of what's happening. And now there are very stringent rules about 7 days notice, about the privacy release forms, about all of it, and they will find every possible way to make it more difficult. My team reached out more than 7 days in advance, but then it takes us many days to get a response. That's the irony of it all. We have to follow these strict protocols, but then they are slow to respond to us to get the details moving forward. And so by the time we specifically requested and got the privacy release form for the man we wanted to speak to today, they're telling us it was within the 48 hours and that they cannot accommodate. And also what was different today, again, is the number of people who were involved in this tour. More than 20 people were there. The private counsel of CoreCivic was there to kind of, make sure, the wrong thing isn't said, or make sure that staff don't answer certain questions. I thought that was new and interesting, and I just think speaks to the fact that there are serious issues that they are rightfully concerned will end up in litigation.
You said that ICE runs part of the facility and CoreCivic runs part of it. Did you get a sense as to who's actually responsible for the medical care?
They said there's an acronym to it that I need to get back to you on, of the medical piece of it. But I think this one was CoreCivic run medical. Okay. But certain, and they work with different doctors and whatnot. But we can follow up in writing on the specifics. I don't want to get it wrong.
Thanks.
Who were the other 20 people in the room? Was this other ICE officials? Could you kind of give us a sense of who else was there?
A lot of folks who just worked at the correctional center. So the warden, the assistant warden, the nurse, guards, somebody who was in charge of operations, somebody who was in charge of security, a couple of people from ICE who we have seen before. When a couple weeks ago I went to the Mesa Gateway Airport ICE facility, there were several of those same staff members from ICE there, the private counsel, and one or two others, I believe, from CoreCivic. It was very overwhelming for myself and just a few of our team members to have such a big group and then not be allowed to really do what we wanted to do, which was talk to detainees.
So you didn't get to talk to detainees. Did you get a tour of the facility?
We sat in a conference room to ask our questions, and then we got a tour of the facility.
Okay. Did you get to see, any detainees on that tour? What did that tour kind of look like?
We walked past some of the areas where detainees are held. So through window, we could see the detainees, men who were sitting in the room. Some were, there was around lunchtime, so some were going to be eating. They showed us rooms where detainees can meet with their legal counsel, visitation rooms, and just honestly just walk through hallways. These visits are, I have found, useful fact-finding, useful for getting, a better understanding of what it's like, but the much more valuable piece is when you can actually talk to people who are there. I think one of my most impactful visits was one of the first at Eloy, where we spoke with 25 or so women, and that's where I feel like I get a true account of the experience of being in one of these detention centers and what these people are experiencing day in and day out. But we will be going back next Friday after the whole, scene and ordeal of not being allowed to speak with somebody today, and after my phone conversation there with this acting director of ICE in Phoenix, I said, okay, we're gonna come back if it's, if it's so impossible to do this visit today, even though we are here and you have 20 people here, we will come back next Friday. So we'll go back next Friday to meet with that gentleman, and I'm going to go back to Eloy and have asked them to have the sign-up sheet available where people there can sign up to speak with us if they'd like to. And last time at Eloy, 90-some people signed up to talk to us, and we only were able to get through 25 or so. So the interest from the detainees is high.